So we stopped at this one talking about how do students differ in terms of intelligence and learning styles. We talked about Sternberg working definition that, of course, defines intelligence as the ability to get what you want, of course, using all the strengths that you have. We explained that Alfred Binet was the first one who tried to examine intelligence in a scientific way, and he developed the IQ. Stenberg describes three types of intellectual abilities or intelligence: analytical, practical, and creative. For Moran and Kronberg and Gardner, there are 9 multiple intelligence, and we'll see the different uh, types of intelligences here. Okay, so there is some kind of logical, mathematical intelligence, which is of course being able to use numbers and symbols. There is some kind of linguistic, according to their theory, there is some kind of linguistic intelligence, which is of course about being able to speak and write well. Existential intelligence, which is about being able to reflect on abstract ideas. Intrapersonal, being able to recognize and apply one's thoughts, feelings, and interests. And interpersonal is about being able to interact with others. Musical, when you have a musical intelligence, you are able to apply concepts and rhythm, pitch, melody, and harmony. Spatial intelligence is about being able to manipulate three-dimensional space. Bodily or kinesthetic is about, of course, being able to coordinate movement. So people who are good at sport are, of course, known for their bodily or kinesthetic intelligence. Naturalistic intelligence is about being able to distinguish features in nature. So according to their theory, or Gardner's multiple intelligence theory, there are different types of intelligence. Uh, and when you are aware of these differences as a teacher, you should stop saying that uh, good or poor performance in one area is of course would guarantee similar performance in another. Okay, so students are different. Okay, and what you teach should be, I would say, taught in different ways. Okay, you should different strategies, different methods, of course, to teach the concepts you teach to students, because as you can see, their minds do not respond the same way, right? So for a one that is of course good at or let's just say good at linguistic intelligence, or has that in linguistic intelligence, would find it easy to learn languages and so on. Some others would find it easy to learn maths. Some others would perform better at sports and so on. So students don't respond to learning the same way, because as we said, there are different types or ways of intelligence. So you should, as a teacher, stop thinking that children are smart or are not smart. Okay. Uh, I remember examples from my education, like when teachers used to say that students are stupid or are not smart because they're not good at their subject. If you teach your English and a student is not that good or does not meet your expectations in the subject, this does not mean that they're not smart. Maybe just the subject, the type of the subject that you teach does not appeal to their type of intelligence. For someone who is interested in music, for example, math would not be a very interesting subject. For someone who's good at sport, for example, English might not be his or her favorite school subject. So people would respond to school subjects based on the type of intelligence they have. If they find it easy to learn a subject, then they respond to it. They respond to it also emotionally, which means they like it and so on. But if you have students who are not, or who I would say need time to understand and to, of course, respond to your learning content, this does not mean that they are not smart. But as I said, just the area that you teach does not respond to the kind of intelligence they have. So this would teach us to stop believing that some students are better than others, or that some smart and some are not. Uh, we need always to distinguish between hardworking students and lazy students, not smart students and stupid students. So this distinction does not stand in the classroom. There are no stupid students. They just don't respond, or their intelligence does not respond to the type of subject you teach. Of course, because people tend to have different types of intelligence and personalities. They have different learning styles. So I'm sorry, there's a mistake here. Styles, okay? Right. So different personalities for students means different learning styles. Students do not learn the same way. Some would prefer just to listen. For some other students, listening might not be enough to learn a subject. They would like to listen and to see pictures, to see videos, and so on. So some would prefer to learn individually, some with groups. So you need to be aware of how your students learn. And you should also use diverse or various ways of instruction. Don't over-rely just on one type of instruction. Like if you use just talk and chalk, as they say, if you just talk, you respond to students who prefer listening, auditory, students who may do better if they just listen to you. But when you use a diverse, I would say, way of or diverse ways of instruction, like using visuals, using group work activities, using project works, and many other stuff. So you help your students through responding to their learning style. So learners, just to sum it up, learners do not learn the same way. Each is different. And as a teacher, you have to make sure you respond to different learning styles in the classroom. So this chapter about students' diversity teaches us a lot of things about how to respect and be aware of our students' differences, and also how to accommodate, how to use instruction, and as I said, and curriculum and all the school practices, of course, to respond to our students' differences and variation. Of course, there are a lot of issues to discuss and a lot of things to ask questions about and so on. I will leave that till the end. And now I'll move to the second topic I have today, which is about behavioral and social theories of learning. This chapter uh, uh, presents content about two different theories of learning: behavioral learning theories and social learning theories. Behavioral learning theories focus on the ways that pleasurable and unpleasant consequences of behavior change individuals' behavior over time, and the ways individuals model their behavior on that of others. This means the behavioral learning theories focus on how the outcome of your behavior uh, changes the way you behave. So when the outcome is positive, you tend to repeat the same behavior. When the outcome of your behavior is negative, you try to change that behavior, right? So the consequences or the effect of your behavior change the behavior, of course. The social learning and also like modeling, so we'll speak about that later. Social learning theories focus on the effect of thought on action and of action on thought. How the like your action shape you the way you think, right? So we'll we'll go deep into these learning theories in a while. Okay, so the first question we need to ask before explaining the two different theories is what is learning? Because we need to define learning from the perspective of these two learning theories. So learning for Shank is a change in an individual caused by experience, right? For Mayer, long-lasting change in the learner's knowledge as a result of learner's experience. So in both definitions, experience plays a very important role in learning. So people, of course, learn from experience, though, for example, according to John Dewey, we don't learn from experience itself. We learn when we spend time reflecting on the experience, not the experience itself. It's not the experience itself that teaches us or that makes us change our behavior, but it's the act of reflecting, of thinking of what went well and what went wrong in our experience that helps us change it. Uh, Changes caused by development, such as growing taller, are not examples of learning. Neither are characteristics of individuals that are present at birth, like reflexes and responses to hunger and pain. So, any like development, uh, like growing tall, like growing, for example, tall, like for kids, and we will see some other examples. And the characteristics that are present at birth. So these are not examples of learning, but they're just reflexes and responses, which are intrinsic, of course. So like in general, so learning like for us, so this is the starting point to discuss the learning theories we have. We need to understand that learning in general is somehow some kind of change in one's behavior that is caused by experience. So this is the starting point like for all of us. I would like you to spend some time to think of these. Are these examples of learning, or are they just development examples as we have just seen? For example, a young child takes uh, her first steps, learning, for example, how to walk. Is this an example of learning? My connection is not that stable. Is this an example of learning? So according to the textbook we have, this is not an example of. So this is, according to the textbook, it is mostly a developmental progression rather than a learning experience. Okay, though how you learn to walk is very important. Okay, like the steps that you take to learn how to walk are very important. But the act of learning, like first steps and how to walk, it's not exactly an example of learning, but it is just a developmental progression. Because remember, as what we said, all things related to developments like growing taller and so on are not examples of learning, but just developmental progressions. An adolescent male feels a strong attraction to certain female. Is this an example of learning? Is this an instance of learning? Again, the answer is no. It's not learned, but learning individual's choice of desirable partners is very important. Like what you learn from the experience is very important. So you can learn from the experience, but the attraction itself toward a female is not a learned behavior, but it's just a kind of instinct, if you like. Okay. A child feels anxious when he sees the doctor coming with a needle. So that's a learned behavior because for this example, the child has learned to associate the needle with pain, and his body reacts emotionally when he sees the needle. So based maybe on the child's experience with the needle, he experienced like the needle. When he first saw the needle, maybe he was not afraid, but when the doctor, for example, tried the needle like on the kid, he felt pain. And the kid later managed to associate that needle with pain. So that's learning. Based on the first experience, that is, the needle caused pain, the kind of association that the kids, of course, builds here is based on that association. A needle means pain, so an emotional reaction, which is crying, is of course a result or an outcome of that. Uh, the last example, long after learning how to multiply, a girl realizes on her own that another way to multiply by 5 is to divide by 2 and multiply by 10 and so on. Right. So is this an instance of learning? The answer is yes, though it can be it can be, I would say, like a higher form of learning. This is an internally generated learning, better as thinking. So the learner here try to internalize all that she maybe learned about multiplying and so on, and took it to a higher level, of course, which is applying the basic knowledge that she learned, of course, to come up with a higher and a more sophisticated form of thinking. So I'd like you just to remember what we said. So learning is a change in behavior that is caused by experience. So remember the experience of the kid that cries when he or she sees the needle, the kind of association between pain and needle. And of course, that's based on the experience with the needle. And remember, learning, for example, like the first steps is a developmental progression. It's not an instance of learning. And the kind of attraction that the boy has toward the girl is a kind of instinct and so on. So it's not also an instance of learning. Of course, like in both experiences, like walking and the attraction that the boy has toward the girl, learning an experience is very important, but the act of attraction or walking itself is not an instance of learning. Learning takes different forms. It can be unintentional, like when you uh, attend, for example, the educational psychology class and you have the intention to learn something, or when you go to the internet and you try to type some form of some word or something. So that's a form of intentional learning. So you have a purpose in mind, you already know what you want and so on. But learning sometimes is unintentional, right? It's accidental. So you watch a movie, for example, on TV, but you learn a lot of things. But sometimes you're not aware of that learning. And for some scholars, our best learning is that happens without knowing it. So they believe that the an intentional learning is the best learning because we often respond emotionally to this kind of learning. Uh, so, as I said, a good example of an intentional learning is what's happening right now here. Okay, our interaction, like on this platform on Zoom, would teach you like a lot of things: how to mute, how to unmute the mic, how even to use your own space, how to raise your hand if you want to speak, and so on. And you did not come to this meeting to learn these things. These things are happening in your environment. Okay. And this is some kind of an intentional learning. You are learning this, your senses are capturing these kind of learning experiences, but you're not aware. So according to the book, we or our senses are usually wide open to environmental events or conditions, which are, of course, the stimuli that are around us. But we are consciously aware of only a fraction of them at one time. Okay. Like now, a lot of things are happening on this online platform, but most of you would be just aware of the fact that I'm talking to you right now, would be just reading what appears on the screen and so on. But there are a lot of other things like happening. okay, in the environment. And there is a medium here of instruction, of course, and then you have like their laptop, there is the light, there is internet connection, you go to Facebook to get things and so on. So there are a lot of things, okay? But the purpose for you is just to get the course and to have an idea about what's going on and so on. But there are a lot of things that you are learning, but you are not aware of course. So the question for teachers has always been, how do we present students with the right stimuli on which to focus their attention and mental effort so that they will acquire important skills? That is the central challenge of instruction, right? So how to get students focus on the desired stimuli that we want them to focus on is the question for teachers. Can you please mute? So for behavioral learning theories, learning is always interpreted in terms of environmental and external events, the ones that we have just labeled as stimuli, of course. So as we learn, we're always surrounded, as I said, by a lot of events, a lot of conditions that we're going to refer to as stimuli in our lecture. So when talking about behavioral learning theories, we always have to mention three important psychologists that shape these theories. So the first one, of course, is Ivan Pavlov. Pavlov has or was interested in how we can condition and stimulate behavior. And we'll explain in a while how Ivan Pavlov contributed to behaviorism or behavioral learning theories. The second figure in educational or in behavioral learning theories is John Watson. And this one is, in fact, the founder of behaviorism. And for Watson, the interest was how to predict and control behavior. The last figure is Skinner, of course. And Skinner was interested in the effects of previous actions on behavior. So let's first start with Ivan Pavlov. Ivan Pavlov theory is known as classical conditioning. I'm sure some of you have already learned this at some point of their education. Of course, they have learned ideas about classical conditioning. This is a very interesting theory, not just in education, but in many other fields, in marketing, and it's widely used in marketing and business. So Pavlov's experiment was mainly conducted on dogs. So before the experiment, what he did is presenting unconditioned stimulus, which is, of course, an unconditioned stimulus, which means it can provoke a response automatically without any prior training or condition. So for example, showing meat to a dog would automatically cause salivation. So this is the observation that the first observation that Pavlov made is that presenting the meat to a dog would make the dog salivate. So he refers to the meat as unconditioned stimulus and to this salivation as unconditioned response. Remember, it's unconditioned stimulus because it triggers an automatic response without any training or conditioning. So that's why it is unconditioned. And this salivation is an unconditioned response because it is automatic and without the need of any training or experience. What Pavlov tried to do is, of course, present a neutral stimulus to a dog and see the reaction. So as you can see here, when presenting a neutral stimulus, like a pill, for example, like ringing a pill, so there is no response from the dog. So the stimulus here, which is ringing the bell, cannot provoke a response automatically without any training or conditioning. So that's why it is referred to as a neutral stimulus. Later, during the experiment, Pavlov paired the ringing of the bell with the meat. So the objective, remember, was to make the neutral stimulus gain the power to prompt a response similar to that produced by the unconditioned stimulus. So remember that when presenting the meat, for example, the dog salivate. The purpose for Pavlov is to pair the meat with a stimulus, with another stimulus like ringing the bell, which is referred to here as conditioned stimulus. So a conditioned stimulus is neutral stimulus that is paired or presented with an unconditioned stimulus. So what happened here? So when pairing the ringing of the bell with meat, like over time, of course, and repeating it with repetition, what happens? The dog starts to salivate once it hears the ringing of the bell. So pairing the bell with the meat and repeating that over and over taught the dog that ringing the bell means that the meat is coming. And what happens for the dog started associating the ringing of the bell with the meat and with the response. So ringing bell for the dog means meat. So meat for the dog means salivation, right? So this process is called for Pavlov classical conditioning. So in classical conditioning, a neutral stimulus, such as I said, ringing the bell, that at first prompts no response, becomes paired with an unconditioned stimulus, such as meat in the example, and gains the power of that stimulus to cause a response, such as, of course, salivation, right? So this is the classical conditioning, and we will see the use of this conditioning, of course, in learning and education. It's very important, and it's widely used by teachers and by many even other institutions and families and so on, like some people use classical conditioning, but unconsciously they don't know that they are trying to pair some kind of neutral stimulus with unconditioned one. Skinner was interested in something that he called operant conditioning. Operant conditioning, because like people like operate on the environment uh, in the apparent absence of any unconditioned stimulus. So it means that people learn from their consequence of their behaviors. So they operate on the environment. So they try things and see the consequences. If the consequences are pleasurable, of course, what they wish, then they engage in repeating the same behavior frequently. But if they get negative consequences, they immediately withdraw and stop repeating the same behavior. So the use of pleasant and unpleasant consequences to change behavior is often referred to as operant conditioning. Okay, so when you do something and you get reward, you will do it again. But when you get punishment, you stop doing it. Okay, so the use of results like this ones or outcomes like this ones is called operant conditioning. Skinner's work or experiments focused on placing subjects in a controlled situation and observing the changes in their behavior produced by systematic changes in the consequences. Skinner was famous for something that is known as the Skinner box, which is a device that contains a very simple apparatus for studying the behavior of animals. So it was about uh, placing pigeons and rats, usually like for Skinner, in a box. The box is a very sophisticated, in fact, apparatus because it it offers a very experimental environment that can be controlled and that can be observed with, of course, pigeons and animals, and with a lever, and watching like how animals like react to that. Okay, react to when they get when they press, for example, a lever, they get food, they keep repeating it, and so on. So observing like how animals learn from the consequences of their behavior and trying to apply that on human beings. So that was like the study, like watch and observe animals, observe how they learn from their, let's just say, experiences, whether rewarding or punishing like ones, and they tend to generate behavior based on the outcome of these experiences. So what are some of the principles of behavioral learning theories? The most important of behavioral learning theories, or the most important principle, is that behavior changes according to its immediate consequences, as we said. Positive experience, positive consequence or result triggers what? Or strengthens like behavior and triggers repetition of the same behavior. And pleasant consequences weaken behavior. So if you do like something, okay, like in the classroom, for example, you answer, you get a plus, +1, +2. So that's a pleasurable consequence, and it would strengthen your behavior to answer correctly or to do assignment and so on. When you get a negative consequence, of course you stop doing that. Like when you, for example, speak loudly in the classroom, or like I don't know, like a classmate, or do something of this kind, you get punished by your teacher, so you stop of course doing that. So this means that when you get a pleasurable consequence, you keep doing the same behavior and you improve it. But if you get a negative consequence, of course, you stop doing that, right? And there are two important concepts to focus on here: reinforce and punish, right? So for to help people learn, you may reinforce a behavior, which means the person gets pleasurable consequences. Punish someone, they get unpleasant consequences, which can, of course, weaken their behavior. What are reinforcers? A reinforcer is any consequence that strengthens, that increases the frequency of a behavior. Like, for example, when you answer, as I said, correctly in the classroom, your teacher may say, very good, okay? Or may even give you +1 or +2, right? So this is some kind of reinforcer, because it can strengthen the behavior. So it depends, of course, on like the use of that, how, and so on. Right. Here we have different types of reinforcers, of course. In behavioral learning theory, so there are some kind of primary reinforcers, which of course satisfy basic human needs. Example like food. We have the example of food, water, security, warmth, and sex, for example. So these are the primary reinforcers of course, they're the basic, they satisfy the basic human needs. And there are some reinforcers that are secondary, which means they reinforces that acquire their value by being associated with primary reinforcers or other well-established secondary reinforcers. So we have some kind of social reinforcers, such as praise, smile, hugs, or attention, right? Activity reinforcers, such as access to toys, games, fun activities, and so on, right? So social, for example, reinforces, like when you say to someone, good, very good, you've done a good job, and so on. So this is an example of social reinforcers. When you say to someone, for example, when you finish this, you can play, or well, I'm sorry, connection again. So as I said, for social reinforcers, like praising someone, smiling, hugging, giving attention to someone, is of course an example of social reinforcers. Activity reinforcers, for example, you can say to a kid, when you like, now you have finished this, you can go to play, okay? Or when you finish this, you can go to play, is of course an example of activity reinforcers. A token or symbolic reinforcers, of course, such as giving money or grades to someone, stars, points that individual can exchange for other reinforcers, okay? So you give them, for example, money, you give them a grade, you give them a star, you give them a badge, a medal. So that's, of course, some how symbolic, and it is widely used, I would say, form of reinforcing. So here we distinguish between two types of reinforcers. We have primary ones that are related with satisfying basic human needs, and secondary that acquire their value by being associated with the first ones or other well-established secondary reinforcers. So remember that we have primary, and in the secondary ones, we have three types: social ones, social reinforcers, activity reinforcers, and token or symbolic reinforcers. There are also positive I hope you can hear me. There are